Thanks, Ben. So 15 new cases today, a total increase of 13. I don't like to see a number that's in double figures and not in single figures, and no one obsesses over the daily numbers more than me or my team. But they are, again, predominantly related to known cases, to outbreaks, and we have to get on top of these outbreaks to really drive these numbers down. The Chadstone outbreak is an illustration, again, of just how significantly this can spread far and wide, and the particular challenges we have in outbreak management. There are now 28 cases with the Butcher Club outbreak in Chadstone. That's 8 staff, 11 family and household members of existing cases, and 4 customers of the Butcher Club. The Kilmore case is in addition to that, and it's been called a different cluster just for logistical management purposes. But the challenge in this, I spoke to it yesterday, the challenge in this wave in Victoria is profoundly different to the first wave. It's profoundly different to what any other jurisdiction in Australia has followed up. I don't think anyone really understands what a gargantuan task the contact tracing has been through this wave. I think the average family size in Australia is about 2.5 people. We've made estimates that the average family size for the 20,000 cases in this second wave has been between 6 and 10 people. And so when there's a case in a household, you're not looking at one other contact or 2 other close contacts. You're looking at 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 routinely for every single household. And you're not looking at no other workplaces where those close contacts might be. You're looking at 3 or 4. And again, with each of those individuals who are in workplaces, they will have their own households, and they will have 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 close contacts. So it is, it's not twice as hard as the first wave, it is 10 times as hard as the first wave in terms of the challenges of following up these cases. Many of them come from difficult social and economic circumstances, certainly not everyone, but there are challenges with respect to that as well. But we are jumping on each and every close contact on each and every case in a very timely way. The Kilmore case is an illustration of a cafeteria that did all of the right things, has a fantastic register of names. All of those close contacts are being contacted, but there are 150 of them. So again, the infectiousness of this virus and the opportunity to have dozens and dozens of people potentially exposed speaks to the challenge. But the testing will happen at Kilmore. People without symptoms can present there and will get tested. And obviously we're asking anyone who's got symptoms to isolate and absolutely make sure they get tested, absolutely make sure they're not in contact with others or going to work or going to public places. In addition, the Chadstone shopping testing continues, asymptomatic testing as a walk-in site at Chadstone and a drive-through in the car park for any symptomatic customers over that relevant period of time. Updates every day to the DHHS website with exposure sites, and they remain valid for 14 days if you've got no symptoms and you've been to one of those exposure sites in the last 14 days. And you go beyond that 14 days, then you're safe, as it were. But any time within that 14 days, you could develop symptoms and you should get tested.
Happy to take any questions you have.
Can I just ask, Brett, if I can get you on this strain? The Chadstone cluster, is that strain stronger? Because it seems like that diner perhaps didn't spend a whole lot of time near the employees or at the cafe itself.
So the strains aren't stronger. We don't think there's a difference in the strains that are circulating in terms of how infectious they are, but the individual will have variable transmissibility. There are some individuals with a high viral load, that has a very low CT value. I spoke yesterday of the Shepparton case that had a very high CT value that ended up being a negative, so that's come off our numbers. Was a true negative, but initially flagged as a positive. There are people who have a very high viral load. We see it in the CT value that's very low, and they can infect a huge number of other people. And the people who get infected can develop symptoms within 1 or 2 days. So that's not a different strain. It's just about the infectivity of the person who was the case.
And have you had difficulties with contact tracing, with people being open about who they've been in contact with?
No, look, it's been a complex and large process, but people have been absolutely cooperative, and people are, as you can see from the responses we've got of those who weren't initially linked in the Chadstone outbreak, have been very forthcoming in coming forward for testing, identifying themselves as being symptomatic or identifying themselves as having been casual contacts. But it's still, 14 suburbs across half of Victoria and dozens of cases, so a tricky exercise.
Just at Cafe, do you think that regional areas need to look at asking people for their licences, given they did the right thing taking names and phone numbers, but if they'd known that person was from Melbourne Metro, they could have turned them away?
Look, there might be additional obligations for regional Victoria in relation to making sure that they don't serve anyone from Metro Melbourne. I think that's worthy consideration. We don't want huge administrative burdens for hospitality, but it is an area to explore. But the obligation is absolutely on those who are coming from Metro Melbourne not to attend.
Is it known how that customer at Kilmore is connected to the Chadstone outbreak? Were they a customer of the Butchers Club, or were they?
They are a close contact in that Butchers Club outbreak.
Were they a customer?
No, they weren't.
Did they work as
So they're related to staff. I won't give further details because, as I said yesterday, small numbers in Kilmore, readily identifiable potentially.
So you've been able to establish whether they were actually lawfully in Kilmore?
They had a permitted work reason to leave Metro Melbourne, so yes.
If they were a close contact, they lived in the house with the person, how did they have permission to leave Melbourne?
So the permission to leave Melbourne is your permitted worker permit, and that relates to your workplace and the work that you do. So that's a permission that you carry with you all of the time. Anyone who's identified as a close contact and is aware of it needs to quarantine. But I don't think that was the case for this individual.
So they were notified after they'd already gone to Kilmore that they were a close contact?
That's right. But the issue in many respects is that when you go to regional Victoria, you can only get takeaway food or drink. You can only go for the purposes of your work and those other essential things that you might require, but not to enjoy the fruits of regional Victoria, as it were.
I take it this person hasn't been fined for the reasons
I don't know. That's a question for VicPol.
Is the question here, Brett, not that if they're living with a case or a potential case, should they not have been told as a precaution to be self-isolating already? Should we not be?
Yeah, anyone who's aware that they're with a case knows that they're a close contact, but you have to get to that point first. You have to have the test result for the close contact, for the case of that close contact, for them to be aware of that.
So just clarifying, their household member hadn't tested positive before they then left and went to that cafe?
So that individual, as far as I know, was not aware that they were a close contact at the point of time that they were travelling. So it wasn't that they were breaking quarantine, it was that they weren't aware that they were a close contact of a positive case.
And just with those 28...
Are you getting everything back now within 24 hours and the contact trace is getting onto people within that time?
Yeah, 96% of results for a start. There are all these elements in the chain from testing to being followed up by contact traces. So 96% of results through within 24 hours, 100% by 48 hours easily. And then 100% or close enough, certainly over 95% contacted within that 24-hour period. I think with these small numbers, it's absolutely everyone, except in those circumstances where they're literally not picking up the phone. We're sending out the Operation Vestige members to do door knocks on the same day.
Professor Sutton, you said 28 cases for the Butcher Club. You said 8 staff, 11 family or household members and 4 customers. Where do the rest of the numbers fit, sorry?
I don't know. I can come back to you.
Can I just check as well with Kilmore, it's just one person that's positive in Kilmore? Because we're hearing possibly there's another one isolating, is that right?
So there is another case in Kilmore that relates to the infected individual.
And is there another one in regional Victoria too that the Premier mentioned, or northeast?
Yeah, only one, as I understood.
Professor Sutton, given you're dealing with households of 6 to 10 people, doesn't that then warrant it impossible that we'll get to that less than 5 daily cases without getting rid of the virus altogether?
Look, we're throwing absolutely everything at it. We can get on top of these outbreaks. We've had complex outbreaks before. Every outbreak's had its complexities, and we do get on top of them. These may well be the very last outbreaks that Victoria sees. I hope that's the case, and we can get on top of them. Those same principles of isolation and quarantine can manage them. And even though this has gotten to a point where it's spread very widely, the recent Frankston outbreak now has control in terms of new cases not emerging. The Hallam outbreak, the same. Complex, large, across multiple sites, but ultimately completely controllable. So as these numbers drive down further and further, and they're going down in aged care in terms of the staff who work there as well, then you're not getting that new seeding. You're not having to deal with another outbreak. That's a point where we'll absolutely get to 5, and it may still well be mid-October.
Just on mystery cases, the 13 for the most recent fortnight that we have the statistic for were spread across 12 different postcodes from Melbourne's southeast to the northwest to the southwest. Given that those cases all relate to, for all of those cases, there's at least one other case that we haven't been able to contact trace. How concerned are you about that?
Yeah, mystery cases are a challenge for that exact reason. They represent a chain of transmission. There are others out there who've had the virus, may not be infectious anymore, but they have been infectious. They may have passed it on to other people who, sometimes we subsequently identify them. We make the linkages back. That mystery case is no longer a mystery case. We do resolve cases that get initially flagged as mystery cases because we find those missing links. But when they never get resolved as defined close contacts, then they do represent more cases out there. But it's only one for each one of those postcodes, more or less, and the trend has still been coming down. We've had 4 days in a row with no mystery cases at various times. If we were to have the next 4 days with no mystery cases, we would get to 5 over a 14-day period, essentially. So it's not impossible to get to that 5 over 14 days, but we watch these cases very closely.
And how concerned are you that the 15 from overnight 7 are under investigation?
Well, so that's normal. I mean, they come in right up until midnight and beyond. The information that we can give of a morning are the ones that can be investigated and linked without necessarily the phone call from 5 o'clock in the morning when the team is onto it. And they're working right through the night, in fact, but in terms of being able to link one to an existing case or an existing outbreak, that's done through our database. But then it's through today that those interviews will happen and they get resolved within the working day.
In relation to Chanel's question, so you mentioned that there is one definite case in Kilmore and then a second who is in quarantine, or a second who has also tested positive?
There's a second case linked to the Kilmore site, yeah.
Are they close contact with we've heard from the cafe that confirmed that one of their workers tested positive. Is that the other case in Kilmore, are they a close contact of that cafe worker? Do they
No, so the cafe worker and the other case are both close contacts of the case who travelled.
How many of today's cases are linked to aged care, and are they residents or staff?
I know that 8 are linked to known outbreaks or complex cases, but I don't know for aged care specifically.
Right, I've been told that there are 4, but that none of them are residents. One is a staff member and the others are contacts of staff members or visitors.
Yeah.
Is it kind of accurate to be describing them as aged care cases if that's the case?
We do. I mean, they're household contacts of aged care cases. They don't go into their healthcare worker numbers. But as linked to aged care, they absolutely are their household contacts in the same way that we're linking household contacts to the Chadstone outbreak.
Professor Sutton, looking at your language today, you've said it's not impossible that we could get to the 5 for mystery cases, saying that we may very well get to the number of daily cases required by mid-October. Is it fair to say it's pretty unlikely, though?
I never know what tomorrow will bring. We can get to a point where there are significant numbers of cases every day, and it drops off dramatically because they're all being chased up, those other close contacts have been contained, and then you suddenly see a decrease in numbers. So, I really can't say what...
Are Melburnians prepare, though, that October 19 mightn't be the day that we see things change?
We all have to be prepared for whatever may come, and it's not easy, no question. As I say, I watch these numbers as closely as anyone in the state, and we all want to get to a point where we're satisfied that we know we'll go to the next step, but absolutely no one wants us to fail in this space, me more than anyone. So we just have to bear that in mind, and we have to take that next step at an appropriate time when it's safe and when it's steady.
Is it possible that, looking at the testing numbers today, 9,200, that today's spike day? I know that's hopeful, but is it possible that it's just spike day is now Tuesday?
Look, it may be. Look, there are more tests that are done early on in the week, no question, and we do tend to get increased numbers on the Wednesday, but we'll see. We just want lots of people to test, because we'll find those cases and we'll manage them.
On the man that travelled to Kilmore, Brett, some experts and epidemiologists saying with the numbers low, we can move to this approach of asking contacts of contacts to isolate just out of a precaution. It sounds like that would have applied to this man that travelled. Is that right? He was the contact of someone who was already linked to the cluster. Is that right?
You still have to identify, test, get that result back, that original contact, but we are looking at managing contacts of contacts as well, or at least contacts of suspected cases. So not waiting for a positive result to come through. If a contact is symptomatic, to ask their close contacts to also quarantine. It's not really quarantine, but to ask them to stay away from others, to effectively isolate, even if that result hasn't come back.
Why are we not doing that already? Because that seems like a much more targeted approach than a big lockdown for everyone.
Yeah, we do it in lots of settings. We do it in a number of outbreak settings. We're effectively asking everyone who's been in casual or close contact in those settings to quarantine. So we're looking into it. There are implications about how you write it into law, whether that's a proportionate measure, but we're absolutely working it up.
This cluster is 28, and then there's some extra ones in Kilmore. I suppose Victorians look at what happened at the Crossroads Hotel in New South Wales, and there was hundreds of people in a pub, and I don't think they even got to 28, and we've managed from one butcher in Chadstone to get to 28. How can Victorians have confidence that the government is playing its part, that we're going to keep outbreaks down?
Well, I've just spoken to you about the really challenging complexities of the second wave. There's no country in the world that has gone through a second wave of this size as successfully as Victoria has. Nobody wanted to be here, nobody wanted to go through a second wave, but we are at a point now where we could snuff this out. But the challenges with each and every case, with each and every network of those close contacts is enormous. I cannot emphasise it enough. And we are doing everything in this space to manage that. But it is not a Crossroads prospectively following close contacts in the same way. If we had a Crossroads, I'm sure we'd manage it in much the same way, if not exactly the same way as New South Wales.
Sorry, I was going to say the butcher shop we know stayed open on the Wednesday, I think, for a day after there was...
No, the butcher shop was closed as soon as a case was identified. When you bring in completely new staff and you have a deep clean, then you can reopen, and that's what happened in this case. In fact, the deep clean was not felt to be satisfactory, and it was shut down again. Another deep clean was done, and it was reopened again on the Wednesday. So it wasn't that it was operating when it shouldn't have been operating. It was that it opened up, as is the case for any place that has a case. If you bring in new staff, completely new staff, all of the close contacts of a staff case are quarantining at home, and a deep clean occurs, then that place should be open for business because it's not a risk to anyone. And I'd like to emphasise that the businesses that do all the right things, no one should stay away from them. They are safe to go to, and really they should be rewarded for the great work that they do in order to be able to reopen again.
So those 8 staff and the 4 customers, when were they there? Were they all there on exactly the same day? And that's when...
No, they weren't, but there were individuals who would have been infectious before becoming symptomatic, and so it's over a period of days before someone gets identified as a case where people can be exposed.
Can I just clarify with masks? Is it correct that from October 11, if you want to go to work, you must have a proper face covering on, even if you've got a medical exemption?
I can come back to you on that. I'd have to look at the exact legal wording in that regard. But everyone who doesn't have an exemption needs to wear a fitted face mask.
And just on the very small number of people who do have an exemption, I think some of them are worried that if they go down the street they'll be harassed or by members of the public or police. Is there some possibility of them, getting some kind of bracelet or something to kind of, so that it's clear that that's the situation they're in, they're not just breaking the law?
Well, I guess so. We're not going to be providing those bracelets, but I think anyone should feel free to show that they have an exemption, and everyone who's walking down the street should understand that there will be individuals who can't wear it for a number of different reasons, and they're not always manifestly obvious reasons. You don't have to look short of breath not to be wearing a mask. There are other reasons and exemptions for not wearing a mask, so no one should be vilified or accused of breaking the rules, because there are a small number of individuals who will have a very valid exemption.
Can I just clarify as well, for the Kilmore diner, if you travel to regional Victoria with a permit, is it takeaway or you can't stop at all for food in that area?
It's takeaway. So the rules that apply in Metro Melbourne are the rules that you take with you. So yes, you can travel for permitted work purposes, but all of the other rules you cannot. The Metro rules apply as you travel.
Has that diner been fined?
No, the diner didn't do anything wrong.
But didn't he do
the individual who dined.
Who dined, yes.
As I say, it's a question for Vic Paul.
On getting to our fives, to the 5 mystery cases over a fortnight, you said that Victoria's one of the best, if not the best, in getting down this big second wave. Is there evidence from anywhere overseas that with this second wave you can actually get to those 5 levels, or are we kind of trying to lead the way in that regard?
Look, I think we're leading the way. We came into a second wave earlier than most of Europe, so we've had to face the reality of this second wave earlier. But we're also in that, as I spoke to yesterday, unique position of being able to potentially stop community transmission altogether. Europe is all connected, free movement of people. They have no opportunity to get to 0 cases and hold it there. So it becomes a challenge in any country that's not an island state or that can't isolate itself from international travellers. So Australia is in that lucky position. That's where we've gotten to, and we shouldn't forget that we snuffed out the first wave in exactly that way. We got to a point where none of that original virus is in Victoria anymore.
At Kilmore, what sort of measures, you sort of briefly mentioned it there, but what can locals expect to see as far as testing? I understand they can already go to the local hospital and get tested, but will that testing regime look different from now on?
I think that there might be a testing that stood up in the longer term, but it'll really be around whether there are further cases in Kilmore and whether there's a specific need for it. But absolutely now everyone can and should go to that hospital site for testing.
And what about testing around Chadstone for people who were at the shopping centre sort of around that time? Is there increased testing and asymptomatic testing available for those people?
Yeah, so there's asymptomatic testing available for all staff who work there, and there's symptomatic testing available at the car park in Chadstone as well.
In terms of international comparisons, Brett, can we still compare Victoria's situation to countries like Singapore or Hong Kong or Korea? Or is it that with the second wave and things change so much that's a useless exercise comparing us to other countries?
No, I think there are valid lessons both ways. I think no one's really had quite the challenge that we have in terms of a second wave that by volume of cases is 10 or more times, 20 times greater than the first wave. And we're doing exceptionally well. Israel's got a second wave that is much, much larger than its first. It's now looking that way for the UK and France and Spain as well. But they are not going to turn it around in the way that we've turned it around. I don't think they have that opportunity. All right, thank you.
Any other issues? I should just, before you do that.